Okay, I think we're live. I think we are here. I'm getting the thumbs up that we have gone onto the interwebs. So welcome everyone, and welcome along to our second Explorers Edition cupping. My name's Ben, and I'll be hosting you through the chats today. So I'm excited to have everyone here and joining us. Look, we're really lucky to be able to source a whole heap of really incredible coffees from all around the world. And besides how they taste in the cup, the information that's behind them and where they all came from and what brought them to life is something that we think is equally important for us to know about. So it's a great opportunity for us to chat about all of that today, and good to have you all pull up a virtual chair across the table as we dive into our feature topic today of Timor Leste. So on that note, I'd like to introduce my co-hosts here. We've got Lauren, who's one of our super knowledgeable account managers. Welcome, Lauren.
Hi, everyone.
And we also have Matt Graylee from Raw Material. They're a green coffee company who've been doing some pretty unique things in not only Timor Leste, but Rwanda, Colombia, Burundi, and beyond. So welcome, Matt.
Thanks for having me.
And we are also going to get to meet Ameta. He's another partner of Raw Material who heads up things on the ground in Timor Leste. And he's sent out some pre-recorded video messages for us. So here's Ameta saying hello.
Hello everyone, so my name is Ameta. I am the one that organizes and look after everything here in Timor Leste. So thanks a lot for inviting me to speak to you today. So hi everyone at home, so how are you going?
So we would have loved to have Ameta dial in and actually chat with us live, but we thought this is a good way of making an opportunity for him to kind of give us his perspective on what's actually happening on the ground. So really awesome to have him speaking to us about his kind of connections. All right, and last but not least, we've got Nicole, who's on the switches in the background there, handling the presentation here. She's also going to be answering any of your questions that you might pop in. So if you see down the bottom of your webinar kind of link, there's a little Q&A button. And if you click on that, you can actually submit some questions. Nicole's going to try and answer as many of them as she can. And we might even have a few opportunities to take some breaks in between and answer them. So hello, Nicole, and thank you.
Hey, everybody.
All right. So for those of you who ordered the Explorers Edition, the coffee packs last week, thanks for that. And hopefully they've arrived safely in your hands. But for those of you who didn't manage to get hold of them, the Ramutin Natural lot, which is one of the coffees on the table today, is still available on the website. And in fact, the other lots are all going to be dropping into the roaster over the coming weeks. So you'll get an opportunity to dive in and taste those. So maybe just treat this session as a bit of a whetting of your appetite if you didn't order the packs, and you'll get a chance to taste them later on. We're going to get stuck into these coffees pretty soon here so that we can kind of slot our chats around the cupping and the tasting of the coffees. And then Matt and Ameta will be helping us understand a little bit more about what's actually going on the ground in Timor Leste, which will be really great to hear. We're going to be using the traditional cupping approach today here while we're tasting. But you can, by all means, use whatever filter method you normally use at home, and that'll still get you some really great results. If you would like to do a cupping, but haven't done this before, Nicole's actually going to try and paste some links into that Q&A section with a little guide and a simplified tasting sheet that should help you kind of take some notes down and guide your way through the tasting process there. So feel free to get into that if you'd like. We're also not going to be scoring these coffees. So traditionally with a cupping process, you would actually use quite a complex score sheet and take down lots of different notes, but it's pretty intensive and complex. And to be honest, I'm much more interested in having a good chat and tasting these coffees along with everyone. So we're going to skip that today. But let's get into this. Lauren, do you want to take us away? What does everyone have on the table in front of them in terms of these coffees?
Yeah, all right. So we have 3 coffees in our packs.
These coffees are from the Ramutan Village smallholders in partnership with Raw Material from the Amera municipality of Timor Leste. There are countless variables that impact the characteristics of coffee in the cup. Post-harvest processing is one of those and has a big effect on flavour. So in our packs, we've got a washed process, we've got a honey process, and we've got a natural process coffee. For the washed process coffee, the cherry and the mucilage is removed for the fermentation and the drying, which generally results in a clean, articulate flavour. For the honey, the cherry is removed, but the mucilage is left on the outside to ferment, which kind of gives it that extra sweetness, that honey-like jammy profile. And then finally, for the natural process, the cherry is actually left intact on the outside of the bean and dried completely. So those coffees tend to have a heavier body, a lower acid. So that's what's in our pack. Matt, I can see you've got a great map behind you there. Can you tell us where is Timor-Leste in relation to Australia and Indonesia?
Yes, so first of all, you'll probably enjoy that it's Pacific centered, which makes a lot of sense for us. So here's Australia, and Timor-Leste is very close to Darwin. It's about a 1 hour flight. It takes longer to get to Darwin than to get to Timor-Leste from there. Very close. Wow. Indonesia is everything off to the west from there.
Awesome. And in regards to Timor-Leste, it's not a country I know a lot about. When I was at school, I remember East Timor being in the news a lot because of the conflict there between the Indonesian military and separatist groups. From a little bit of reading I've done, I know that the United Nations stepped in. Indonesian military relinquished control in 1999 and they became their own nation in 2002. Can you give us a little more historic and economic context than that?
Yes, so it was a 25-year-long war with Indonesia, and then finally Timor-Leste became the first new nation in the new millennium. And at that time, 60% of the population were living below the poverty line as everything was destroyed in the war. And then across the last 20 years, about 1 percentage point per year, there's been improvement up to the point where now only 40% live below the poverty line, which is massive improvement. And that was all built on the back of oil. So Timor-Leste across that period has been the most reliant on oil of all countries in the world, with 95% of the government's income coming from it across that time, that's really intense, right? To be so reliant on a single export. The second most valuable export was coffee across that period, and yet we don't see it very, very frequently. At this point, new oil revenues have run out, and the petroleum fund will likely run out in 10 to 12 years. So suddenly the second most important and largest export, coffee, has become critically important.
Yeah, amazing. So that's a lot of significant change in recent history. A critical part to any new quality coffee is the terroir, the conditions, the soil. Ameta has put together a video for us to give us a picture of the landscape.
Here in Timor-Leste, we have a lot of mountains, so there is no flat land. So coffee is growing very high, from about 1,000 to 2,000 meters above sea level. So this gives us a great opportunity to grow very high quality coffee. So Timor-Leste is organic by default. So we don't use any chemical fertilizer for coffee, even if coffee or a product in Timor-Leste are not certified organic, but it is actually organic.
We got some looping there of the different threads, but I think Ameta has got a second little section here as well in regards to the coffee kind of actual farming on that land. So not only is it super hilly, but there's a particular approach to farming there. So let's just have a quick listen to that.
Here, coffee mainly growing in forest with a small garden, as you can see here, with a lot of shade tree, and our production per hectare is very low, but the quality is very high. So the coffee variety in Timor-Leste are typical, mocha, and hybrid de Timor.
So Matt, Ameta mentions there the Hybrido de Timor variety. It's not a variety that we hear a lot about, but by all accounts is critically important to the coffee in Timor-Leste. Can you tell us a little more about that variety?
Yeah, and critically important to the world. So in 1927, it was discovered, and this was an interesting situation where the fragile Arabica with 44 chromosomes somehow was able to breed with the 22 chromosome Robusta, which has its harsher taste but sturdy disease resistance. And that original tree now has a fence around it, and you can go and visit it. It's still alive. This tree has since served as the backbone of much of the coffee we drink. Because it had 44 chromosomes, this was the first time that the leaf rust resistance could easily breed into unlimited numbers of new Arabica varieties. So coffee lovers all around the world owe a debt of gratitude to this donation of Hybrido de Timor, because from it, the cultivars that were created form the basis of almost all Arabica coffee production. So this is especially important now as climate change puts ever greater pressure on the trees.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing to kind of hear. Obviously, that the growing kind of conditions, the landscape, and also those political and cultural conditions that have kind of come about, and it's pretty important, I think, for us all to understand. So it's great to have you paint that picture, Matt, because every coffee that we drink has this same, or not the same, but a history behind it. It's the history of the people, the history of the land. And all of those are integral in kind of what we actually get to enjoy here in the final cup. They all feed into what's possible to kind of bring to life. And I mean, in fact, you can kind of take it that one step further, right? Of like what we're actually drinking here. The fact that we physically have these coffees in front of us is kind of that next step in the cycle where what we choose to purchase and where we choose to purchase it from kind of supports the future of and the sustainability of coffee producers and kind of new livelihoods. So it's all kind of connected. This history brings about what we've got in the cup, and us choosing to drink this cup is in turn feeding into what hopefully you guys can kind of do a little bit further along. So we've kind of got a little bit more of a picture there of kind of where is Timor-Leste and kind of what has come before. We're going to get brewing up these coffees in a moment. So if you haven't already, probably now's a great time to go and grind your coffee. We've already got these ground for us and capped off. Matt, Lauren's kind of run us through the three processes that we've got here. But, we talked a little bit about Ramutin kind of village, and they're named kind of Ramutin. Can you tell us, like, what does that actually mean in terms of where that is and who the producers are?
Yeah, so Ramutin is the name of the neighborhood where we built our first community wet mill, which is the processing center where all the coffee cherries are transformed. And we bring in coffees from several different regions, and we're growing and producing naturals and honeys in other little satellite spots nearby. But it was the cherries from those producers directly around that first mill. So these are the same people who work in the mill and who built the mill. It is those people of Ramutin. Their cherries became the coffees that you have in front of you. And we also have a video from Ameta to explain a little further.
We make three styles of Ramutin's coffee. So the first one is a wash coffee, and the cherry are sorted for color, size, density, pulp, ferment, and then wash before drying. And the second one is honey. So the cherry are sorted for color, size, density, pulp, partly fermented, then dry. So the last one natural. So the cherry are sorted for color, size, density, and then dry with the skin, dry the whole cherry. So you are trying our first proper harvest. So we are really pleased with the results.
Cool. And so, Matt, Ameta and both yourself have mentioned like Rametin and Rametin Village and the farmers there. But when we talk about farming in Timor Leste and specifically, I guess, about Rametin, what's the size of those farms?
Yeah, the typical farm size is very, very small. Around, we can measure it in size of trees instead of land. It's about 100 to 500 trees, incredibly small. And they also use a lot of terracing, so a lot of good, clever use of land to avoid any slips and to maximize the small spaces that they have. It's quite similar in some ways to what you find in Papua New Guinea.
Yeah, great. So, I mean, I think that the size of the farms is kind of a really interesting and critical component to the kinds of community and collaborative spirit, because, you know, when you're talking about that size, you really have to come together to kind of mobilize, you know, how you process the coffee and the infrastructure and take kind of control further down the supply chain. So that's key. All right, let's get smelling and tasting these coffees. So we're going to line these up and have a smell of the dry fragrance, so the ground coffee before it's had water on it. Just for the tasting today, we're going to start off with the washed, then the honey, and then the natural lots, and that's a good way to kind of progress those through. So let's take a little smell. I'm just going to uncap these and start off with the washed kind of coffee. So if you're having a smell of those, what you're finding that, like, to me, this is just a super satisfying smell. It's kind of got a really pleasant toasty, kind of warm toasty characteristic, and kind of some roast nuts in there. So in a really nice kind of warming kind of way. So that smells great. Very clean as well, which I'm excited about. And if we have a smell of the honey process here, I don't know whether the name of the processing always just leads me down this path, but to me, it actually is smelling quite honeyed. So it's that warm caramel characteristic. It's kind of a little less of the nuts that I was smelling in the washed process, but more kind of caramel. I think I said earlier to Lauren, this smells almost like a Snickers bar. So instead of maybe we had a picnic in the first round there, a little bit of sweetness and roast nuts, and now we're going into some Snickers with that dark caramel. There's a hint of some dense fruit in there. And then if we move along to the natural process, so same coffee, same group of producers, there's just huge pops of fruit coming out of that. I always get like a really interesting kind of candied, like a manufactured candied smell to it, almost like bubblegum. But then there's also like a tropical character in there. So rather than if you had natural coffees before and you might be expecting things like berries and stuff like that, this is kind of a little bit more tropical fruit. So I'm thinking like guava and melon and so on. Lauren and Matt, have you guys checking out anything in particular in there?
In the honey, I'm sort of getting like a spiced kind of plum jam thing going on.
Yeah.
Whereas in the natural, that to me is like a boozy cherry ripe.
That sounds pretty delicious.
Yeah.
Matt, we've got a lot of candy and chocolate coffee references happening here, so I hope that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, this coffee really lends itself to those notes from extra fermentation. When I'm cupping, I'm looking at it maybe through a slightly different lens, thinking about where these notes came from and what we can do this season. So the season starts and we start bringing in the high altitude cherries literally next week. And so we have to have our recipes aligned. We can do a couple of experiments near the start, but we really want to know what we're doing from the outset. So what I'm smelling here is we can afford to ferment the wash a little longer, so we can get more acids. And well, that's more of a flavor note, but I think it's. Sorry. Are you going to say something?
Feedback. To boiling right next to someone. I think that might be
Oh, is that a kettle boiling? Is it?
Lauren's kettle going on.
Yeah. So that's not a fragrance note, but
Sure.
what I'm discovering cupping these over and over is that, yeah, I think all of them could lend themselves to a little more pushing towards that trade-off of clarity for bold fruity notes. It seems like they are the ones that are really standing out. So yeah.
Sure. Well, it's exciting to kind of smell. There's some really great characteristics in there, and the big thing is cleanliness, which I think when you're looking at buying coffee, or certainly for us as roasters and looking at buying coffee, certainly from new projects as well, that consistency and cleanliness is like a critical part of being able to pass a great experience on. All right, so we're going to get pouring some water into these samples. I might just move these little bags aside so we can all see, and I'll reach over and around. So in a moment, we're going to get pouring onto these. You want your kettle to be around 95 degrees, just so that when you do pour it onto your coffee, it loses a little bit of temperature through the spout. It's going to be around 93 when it hits the coffee grinds. You want to start a timer and steep those for 4 minutes. The great thing about the traditional cupping approach that we're going to be doing here is that it really makes the variables all very consistent, so that any differences that we taste amongst these cups is really going to be down to the raw kind of product, the raw material, if I may, that we have in there versus any kind of brewing techniques or approaches. So as I get into that, maybe a really good background for everyone, speaking of raw material, is Matt, if you could give us a little bit of a rundown about the actual company Raw Material, because it is a little bit of a unique entity in the coffee world.
Yeah, hey, great segue there, Ben.
No worries.
Yeah, I think the best way to explain Raw Material and what we do is to first outline the paradox of the coffee industry. And you may have heard of this before, because these days it's widely, if only vaguely, known that producers of coffee are subject to volatile and low prices in the standard market. And often the price that they receive is lower than the cost of production. And this situation can lead to cycles of debt and extremely limited opportunity. So people know this and repeat it anecdotally, but let's just take this opportunity to dig in a little deeper. So consider that most coffee in the world, about 60%, is produced on 12.5, more or less, million family farms that are smaller than 5 hectares. And then almost half, about 44% of the world's smallholder farmers live below the poverty line, and just shy of a quarter persist in extreme poverty, and that's using the World Bank proxies of $3.20 a day and $1.90 a day. It's very, very low. So if you can imagine yourself in that position, one in which fulfilling basic needs like having food is a heavy source of stress every single day, you can see that quite easily that investment in future production and quality is near impossible for most families for that we rely on for coffee, and thus a cycle is in play. Meanwhile, at the other end of the chain, you guys are all experiencing the greatest time to be involved in coffee, right? Drinkers like ourselves are having the highest quality experiences ever. We're all willing to pay for it, as shown by the marketplace. And it's undoubtedly the best time to be involved in a cafe or a roastery or specialty coffee in general. There's no sign of it slowing down. The market compound annual growth rate is around 11 to 12%. So a lot of profit is being generated. Now, this is the paradox that I'm speaking of. We've got a booming at one side and then no sign of it at the other. So in my opinion, this is an example of the dark cloud that hangs over modern civilization, right? There's more than enough wealth in the world for everyone to live a dignified life. And I think that personally, I feel that we've got an obligation, once we realize how lucky we are, to think hard about how we can share that luck and then take action when we figure something out, right?
Yeah.
However, it's when you join me looking through this lens that you'll see this paradox is in fact also an opportunity. If we think about it right here, we've identified a clear, simple occasion to make good on the ever elusive promise of development through trade. Quite simply, we've got growth and no slowing down here. And at the other end, we've got need. So unlike most really big problems, this one has a relatively simple, self-evident solution. We can just connect the two ends in a new way. And so I started Raw Material with my friends a long time back now to try and do just this. So what we are is we're not technically a company, we're a social enterprise. We're registered as a community interest company in the UK. And we work with a network of global smallholder coffee farmers and coffee buyers like 5 Senses to facilitate trade at stable, sustainable prices while improving quality yields and ultimately community outcomes. 100% of the profit we generate goes to producers, either directly through payments for their coffee or through investments that are targeted, like the community wet mill we just spoke of and other programs that we'll talk about later. And anything that's designed to eliminate the barriers that's stopping the growing specialty market being reached by producers who would benefit most from supplying it. And so far the results have been good in recent times anyway. At first we were, flapping around trying to figure out exactly what works. But for example, in Colombia last year, producers in the RM system generated on average 5.1 times the household income they would have generated otherwise, which is, we had a bit of a celebration there. So yeah, I think if we all do our job very well, then it makes sense to me that communities growing coffee should not only survive, but they should really be able to thrive through producing coffee, given that the market is booming.
Thank you, Matt. That's amazing.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So everyone should have hit the 4-minute mark now. So we're going to break the coffee. So you need your spoon. I'll show you what we're doing. We're going to basically take our spoon, give it a little rinse, and we're going to push the coffee back 3 times. And just inhale that aroma as you do that. Rinse your spoon between each cup. All right. So in terms of some of those aroma notes on the break, I'm still getting like that toasty roasted hazelnuts, peanut brittle from that wash coffee. A lot of honey and sweetness, kind of that plum jamminess from the honey coffee, and lots and lots of Christmas cake and spices and booziness from the natural there.
Yeah, there's some really great aromatics kind of coming out of all of those. I think that it's interesting. They do really lead in and tie in from what we were smelling in the dry fragrance, which is another great indicator of a consistent quality coffee, where at the different stages of interacting with it and experiencing it, you're kind of getting a nice consistent thread of expectation and delivery. So that's awesome. So we're going to kind of leave these coffees to cool down a little bit before we dive in, probably about 10 minutes. Those of you at home who have brewed it up during filter or making a filter coffee, you're probably going to get to dive into that a little bit quicker than us. So you're lucky things. But Matt, it's really great to understand a little bit more of the role and the connectivity that that Raw Material is making there, and it's been obviously pretty significant work. And I'd heard a lot of the work that you were doing in Colombia and kind of in East Africa for a while now, but they're all pretty established coffee regions, right? So how did you end up landing in Timor Leste and kind of starting the project there? Because it kind of seems like it's not really on our radar normally, and the fact that you've dove in with such a big project, it'd be great to hear how that started.
Yeah, it wasn't on our radar either. And isn't it odd that it's so close to Australia with such
I
a
know.
history?
Yeah.
A fraught history, but such a history. And it wasn't on our radar, but we have a list of places we could do work. And we follow a framework that we developed basically coming from the effective altruism movement. And we tweaked it to fit what we're doing. And that is, we want to run any possibility through this framework of importance, neglectedness, and then solvability and personal fit. So what's our capability to address the issues? Are there others working in the areas? And what's the magnitude of the problem and issues faced by those who we would work with? And so when I was invited to help out on a project in Timor Leste by a good friend, Andrew Hetzel, from Coffee Strategies, there we met David Friedman at the Asian Development Bank, and they explained the lay of the land, the situation that I've expressed so far tonight. And when assessing the potential area of Timor Leste through that frame, it leapt to the top actually. So within 1 month of getting there, we'd had the meetings and we'd moved that right up to the top of the list, and we were ready to get started.
Yeah, it sounds like the minute you decided to, it was on your radar, you assessed it, it jumped right up to the top of your radar, and it seems like it's been all go kind of since, which is pretty incredible. You know, one of the critical things that you were explaining has happened is the building of some community wet mills at Sabe and also now in Malabe. So Ameta actually put a little video together showing us the construction of this new mill, the Malabe mill. So the lots we have in front of us are from the initial mill at Sabe, and now Malabe is the one that's just been built. And Ameta's done like an awesome job here trying to be like selfie video man plus tour around a mill. So let's have a look at what he's taken us through.
Hello everyone, so now I'm going to show you something that we have did during COVID-19 time. So can you guess? This is the new facility or new processing center that we did during COVID-19 time. So it was taking 1.5 months that we completed. So I'd like to explain to you about, or based on something that just now I introduced to you for the different types of coffee processing. So yeah, and we received the cherry here, and so the cherry are sorted from the colors that is did by the farmers, and the size and the density we did it. So here will be the something manual that can do the colors, the size, the cherry size here. So the small cherries comes out, then big cherries goes in, and then the other one is this is the tunnel. So this tunnel can separate the floaters, the sinker and the floaters. So as you can see, this is the two tanks. So that is the tank for sinker or the good cherry one. This is for the floaters. So in this area we have something to take it here, and people will do another sorting here just to make sure that everything is right before going to pulper machine. So the pulper machine is just down there, and then when we pop it here, the cherry will go to this tank, and then we ferment it in this tank for 16 to 24 hours, and then we wash it here, and then we take it out to here to separate the floaters, and here the floaters here, and then the sinker one we will take it out, comes out from here, and then we take it to dry. So this is the new processing facility that we did during COVID-19 time. COVID-19 time, even the country is locked down, but we try to keep working the same things like a normal. Even some days difficult, but we try to manage to get everything out from the capital to the district, and then we try to manage to build all this processing center.
Okay, so it's pretty amazing how busy Ameta and the whole crew have been there in amongst COVID lockdown. I know I've just been sitting at my kitchen table, like on a laptop, certainly not building a wet mill. But just to quickly recap for everyone, if you haven't ever seen a wet mill before, it might be a little hard to just wrap your head around what it really does there, because there's lots of different stages. But essentially, the cherries of the coffee tree are all being brought into that wet mill by all of the farming kind of community around, and then they're being processed and treated in different ways. So each of those compartments, the concrete tanks that were being shown there by Ameta, are taking the cherries through different parts of the process. And a really well thought out wet mill like that, it's actually pretty exciting to see, because it is really well laid out. It's very logical, great flow. It enables like the quality of the coffee to be maintained. So the cherry is brought in, and in this particular case, it's being pulped. So this is for the washed processes. The fruit's being taken off, as Lauren kind of mentioned, and soaked in those tanks and sorted at various levels. He mentioned 2 different sorting steps there, which are critical in taking like potentially underripe cherries or overripe cherries and other floating bits out, so that the final result that's exported is even higher quality. So that was really cool to see. Lauren, we've kind of looked at a bit of infrastructure there, but there's other stuff going on, right?
Yeah, well, that was going to be my question for Matt. Like, we know that the wet mill that's been built has increased the quality that the guys are able to send out to us, but I think that there's some other initiatives in the work, Matt?
Yeah, so this wet mill was one of the things we did. It was designed by myself and one of our business partners, Miguel, from Colombia. And then all the sketches were done by my dad through FaceTime. I draw like chicken scratchings like a kid, but he knows that. And then I show him, and then he makes it look like a photo if you were there in the future. And that's what we were sending through WhatsApp in real time, while the team on the ground just were smashing it out. So that wet mill's designed using all the best ideas that we've discovered in about 20 odd other coffee producing regions, and then adapted for the local conditions, hence a lot of concrete block usage and things like that, and gravity to move things through the chain. And it's all open source, so if anyone wants to copy the mill design, they can just ask, and there they can go. So speaking of Miguel, Miguel is our expert. He and I have known each other since 2012. We've been working in Colombia and other countries together. And he came across to Timor Leste to initially host in-person trainings. And then after those in-person trainings, we really thought about how it could be far more efficient, the return on investment, if we were to create an 11-part video series that actually took the place of those trainings. And the reason that could work is because this is one of those countries where if you are using mobile data through Facebook and WhatsApp, it's unlimited, whereas all other data is very expensive. So people really rely on those sending videos around. So we made these 11-part video series with Jeff Hahn of Coffee Man film fame. I think he won a very big award here in Australia for documentary a couple of years ago. He came over and helped, and it was funded through Market Development Facility and Asian Development Bank. So we've got a clip here of Ameta and Miguel teaching.
Have to put it in a thicker layers so you can slow down the process. You don't want to ride too fast, because then you're going to burst all of the parchment, and that will kill the embryo, which means the coffee won't taste that good. In here we have an example of wild pulp coffee that is from the ripest cherries possible. So you can see that it's really clean parchment. As well, we have regular parchment or underpicked, and you see that the ripe cherries don't pulp that easily. That's why you have a lot of skins and pulp on the mass. And finally, you have all of the floaters, which don't look that great. That's why you have to classify your coffee, and always, if you process the best cherries, you will have the best parchment.
And for those of you who are dialing in and from home or from work, these kinds of videos are pretty unique, and it was cool actually. I was saying to Matt, if you have a look on like the YouTube clips of these, the comment sections is filled with producers all around the world, like not just in Timor Leste, just saying like, hey, this is amazing. I can't believe this information is here. Can you do one for this country and this country? So that's pretty awesome. There's definitely more that Matt and the raw material crew have got into, but I think let's jump into the coffees because they're at a really nice temperature to taste now, and we all actually want to just taste these. So we're going to be, as we said with the cupping, we're going to be doing some slurping results here. Cupping is just tasting off the spoon. So sorry, it's going to be a little noisy for everyone, but you knew what you signed up for. So just rinsing in between. We're going to start with the washed coffee first. Take a little bit of the spoon. And again, like a lot of this is coming through very similar to aroma. It's super clean. And one of the things that I love about this washed lot is the texture and the mouthfeel of this coffee. It's really silky. It just sits beautifully on the palate. A little bit of toasty characteristic, but enough acidity there, kind of a really gentle citrus acidity that just lifts it up. So really kind of beautiful on that end. We go through the honey process lot, so a little bit more of the fruit left on there. It definitely shifts into a little bit brighter. There's a little bit more fruit kind of driving through. It's kind of a reduced style of fruit, like dried orange zest or something like that. And that nuttiness, as we said, has kind of disappeared a little bit. So we've got that really toasty, satisfying kind of washed version, and then the fruit dials up just a little bit on the honey process there. And if we go to the natural, it kind of again follows through with that fragrance and aroma that we're expecting. So again, to me, quite rich actually, quite a rich lot of coffee there. Dried pawpaw, a lot of those tropical kind of fruit characteristics, but really beautifully balanced. And I think the thing that you'll notice with all three of these is, again, that tactile element, that silkiness, is a really pleasing characteristic that threads all the way through. Matt, what are you picking up? Anything that jumps out at you? This is like, there's been some gaps in between actually tasting these coffees, yeah?
Yeah, sometimes I don't have them available, but thank you so much for sending me this pack. It's been great. I'm very pleased. I'm very pleased with how they've come out, considering especially that this was the first proper season. Yeah, just I'm very happy, but I still think there's potential. So I'm going to get back in there as soon as Corona will allow. Yeah, to make some tweaks. Flavor wise, yeah, I'm just so happy with the bold fruits and the cleanliness, because right up front, as you said, the first thing we're aiming for is just very, very clean, safe coffees, and we'll move from there. So achieved.
Yeah, awesome. Lauren, anything jumping out?
Yeah, I mean, I'm loving the red berries in the honey coffee. It's super sweet, super silky. The natural is like a glass of sangria. So it's got that kind of orange peel, some spice, super boozy, like a red wine sangria. Yeah, yeah. It's like some pretty incredible results like we've been talking about. This is the very first lot coming out of the Tsabe wet mill. So there's obviously been coffee grown in the region for a fairly long time, but this is the first lot out of this project, and to have results like this is pretty exciting. As we said, we're not
scoring these today, but when we have in the past, normally the washed coffee's been sitting about kind of 83, the honey is about 84, 85, and the Ramutin is like 86, 87. But to be honest, I think like cupping these today, and we've done a few rounds of this particular roast, I think that those points could generally be coming up like a couple of points each. So some really solid coffees on the wash, and that Ramutin is kind of, you know, it's got a lot of layers of flavour and really distinctive. So pretty delicious there. But as we kind of were saying, there's a lot of things that have come into like making these come to life. So Matt, you've kind of built some new infrastructure there with the washing stations, and then you started off some training videos with Miguel, kind of like trying to distribute that knowledge. But there was a pretty fun and kind of slightly left field approach to education and getting people on board. What was that?
Yeah, so it was David Friedman from Asian Development back again, creative genius that he is. The idea of taking those training guides and working them into a reality TV game show. So one barista, one farmer, that's your team. Episode 1, you're in the city, so the farmers are fish out of water. Episode 2, you're in the countryside. The baristas are all like, I can't dig a hole. I thought I was strong. So you've got simple slapstick comedy there. Let's watch a clip and you'll get a feel.
Ia prosesso ne, limpeza ba equipamento no habai mak importante liu. Mai be, mai itatau tutuir malu. Depois de itahili café musa ne bedia, ita se hasai café kulit no isin. Julio incentiva na fatin, mai be itahare barista sira susara to halu tuir. Afinal, saya agricultor ne, laos batira fácil. No icus liu, processo fácil. Processo idane e a Timor Leste é uma baracusa. Tamba risco que liu compara ho tolo selo. Quando kuho tuana no hamos ne fatin, hasai ne kulit no isin, no husi halo fermentação durante kalanida tomak e a fatin mahon. Fermentação idane bele husi café e a belaran, no husi ia ar livre, ou bele husi ia karon laran, takametin, atula bele anintama.
Abang ita say horom, ni moring sila hanasa. Idane different,
Lorong idatang nebe colentebes. Ita ne concorrente sira, fila ba descansa.
Awesome. So that looked brilliant, Matt. So with the all of the infrastructure and the education, you've had the national coffee quality competition as well?
Yeah, so in 2018, where we're knocking out all these different projects in breakneck speed, there wasn't enough time to actually have a proper export and production, but there was just enough time, thanks to Meta and the team coming in under time and under budget and building the community wet mill. There was just enough time to take $2,000, run into the hills, buy enough cherry to process it using just the basic plan that we'd outlined through the video guides and in the TV show, and then enter the national competition. And let's have a look at the result. We've got a clip here.
And you can, even if you don't experience in cupping, you go around and you can really tell this is significantly better. Yeah, it is. No, we're happy with this one.
Scored high. Leaky sample high. 7 Hamanan. Café Lisa, Uve, Maubara. Abele apete kalai. Mana mai maka rai busilara rai mote atsabe.
I don't know about you, Matt, but I don't know how many times you've watched that clip, but I definitely get chills up my spine watching it. That's pretty amazing.
Don't look too close.
Yeah, I know. It's like I got. No, I mean obviously you can see the emotion and the kind of investment that Ameta has, and I'm sure like so many of the crew who have been working on it have, and you know, to get a result like that in such rapid kind of succession of all of the efforts is definitely a recognition of not just that or celebration of the results, but also like a really strong indicator for what, you know, it can build into in future years and future work. So that's like very cool to kind of see that that kind of happening. And look, Matt, I know that like as we've kind of talked about with all of this work that you've done, that raw material has kind of got this really admirable dual focus, right? Of, you know, rolling up your sleeves and getting stuck into very immediate, very grassroots kind of activities. But you've also got this broad vision and big picture thinking for what you want to try and achieve. So like, what does the future of like Timor Leste and Timor Leste coffee and your involvement there really look like?
Well, our ultimate goal is to not be needed. So we don't want to keep winning the competitions, but rather we want it to be the case that the competition just keeps getting higher and higher, and we can slip away and no one even notices, right? Like that's the ultimate goal, is to get out of the way. And so that first year, it was fantastic to get first place, because then people were even more into watching the video guides, you know, because it seemed very apparent then that there was some gold in there, and that's great. In this last season, of course, we didn't get first place. The person who got first place was one of Miguel's students, so that's good. It keeps sending people back. But we did get second, third, fifth, and eighth. And I think these are some of the copies that we've got in front of us. But in long term, we don't want to be winning these things. We want to leave. So I mean, obviously Ameta will be there, but so how we're going to do that is this year the focus is on building these mills in Malabe and Koileki, and we're going to keep rolling out like that. And that's with the help from MDF, which is largely funded by the Australian government, actually. So shout out to MDF there. And cupping labs. So cupping labs, we want to build cupping labs out in the hills. So the first one is being built right now by Ameta and the crew in Atsabe. That's super important for shifting the power dynamic from the men to the women. Currently, when we host trainings, it is a real struggle to not have 100% male turnout. And obviously, we can see the future when we do that. We're passing on skills and positions, building new roles that are going to be held by men. So with the cupping labs, what we've found in other countries is the natural dynamic means that women end up taking those roles initially with no one quite aware of the fact that that role of the lead cupper in those labs is in the future going to be the key role that accesses the marketplace. So I think cupping labs is the smoothest way to start that transition. So that's going to be a big focus of this year. There will also be the first Q course being held soon, you know, Corona allowing. The first Q course for the country, which is very exciting. And apart from that, it's just continuing those training programs, both in person and finding other excuses to get those video guides put up on screen in any public place possible.
Yeah, cool. There's some, it sounds like a busy immediate kind of future ahead. And like, obviously you're in there, you know, raw material as a social enterprise, and you're aiming to kind of help lift up livelihoods. And so like specifically with the coffee development there, how are you kind of seeing that growth of the Timor Leste and that improvement, I guess, of the Timor Leste coffee sector really, like, I guess, supporting the improvement of those livelihoods?
Well, I could talk about this for hours. It's what gets me really excited. So I won't, but I will say that unlike income from oil, flourishing agricultural sectors provide sufficient livelihoods, employment and incomes. They enhance food security and nutrition, improve sustainability of natural resources, increase resilience to climate shocks. Agricultural sectors are critical. And so you can see the potential to contribute towards poverty reduction in what Cambodia pulled out in just 5 years, 2007 to 2011. They managed to drop their poverty rate from 50 to 21% in just 5 years. And the main factors explaining the reduction was the higher commodity price, which we're achieving now, the ability for farmers to sell to the market. What we're doing right now is an exact example of that. The increased agricultural wages and an increase in non-farm business activities. And those last two display the growth multiplier effect of an agricultural transformation. It's like that compounding flow-on effect. So I could talk for hours, but agricultural sector development is critical in one of the most effective ways that we can improve the world. Yeah,
that's awesome. I mean, that's exactly why we were so inspired to kind of get involved in this, because it's like sharing that value along the supply chain and kind of helping lift people up is really what kind of gets us pretty pumped and drives us. So to see you guys doing that so tangibly and so laser focused on it was, definitely made us want to jump on and buy this small amount of coffee to help support in this initial year. But obviously we also know that we're not alone in this, right? Like, to support the scaling and the growth of like the Timor Leste sector relies on more than just one coffee roaster like ourselves. So yeah, definitely a shout out to our Australian peers, Veneziano and Grayson Taylor, who are two Australian roasters who also jumped on to support the project, which is really great to kind of see, and a whole number of really awesome international roasters. So it's great to have the collective support of the specialty kind of community there, jumping on and supporting the growth of this. And obviously thank you to all of the people who have bought the packs so far, because that's another critical part of supporting this project. And look, I think that's probably a pretty good place for us to wrap things up and to kind of finish the conversation. I mean, Matt, a huge thank you to you and Ameta, not only for obviously bringing these coffees to life and helping bring them to us, but for joining us on the chat and all the videos there. We're definitely looking forward to drinking all of the future harvests and tasting how things change in Timor-Leste. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. And thanks for having this idea of this conversation, because this is a great opportunity for lovers of coffee to get very, very close and behind the scenes in a relaxed, interactive way. So like, great idea, guys. Also, nothing we do is done in a vacuum. So I really have to raise our hand and say, hey, it's not just raw material, of course. It's specifically, I have to say thanks to Mario and Andrew and David for constantly opening doors and creating opportunities for us, and Nimi and Zamat at MDF for taking our often vague concepts and making them real. And then I got to say thank you to Jeff and Amy and David and Matt and Gobi and Chris and Laura, Marcus, Phil, Emma, Terrence for advising us constantly, and me specifically on a personal level, because none of it's possible without this huge input from everyone just stroking with cadence in the same direction. Yeah. So thank you everyone.
And I think Ameta also, we wanted to farewell him, and I think he recorded us a little farewell video too.
So thank you very much. I hope you all well, and then keep trying our coffee, Timor coffee, especially from Achabe's coffee. Bye, ciao.
And thanks, Lauren, for all of your tasting notes and help today.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
And yeah, for everyone who dialed in at home or ordered the packs online, thanks a huge amount for supporting this. We hope you've enjoyed it, and we look forward to welcoming you at Explorers Edition number 3. Thank you and goodbye.